Hey guys, welcome back. We took last week off from Ironman. I had a friend of mine who asked to come in and be a guest speaker, and I didn't want to put this on him. I didn't want to have him speaking to a camera. It's actually quite a bit harder than what you think it is. So anyway, he did a great job for us last week, and we are on to chapter 5, and we're talking about the bitter roots, this toxic emotion about bitterness. And we all throughout our life have reasons to have been bitter or are bitter about certain things. You know, we can justify, we have been wronged by people, we have been abused by people, people have cheated us. Whatever it is, the overall feeling is we're mad about it. We want to get revenge on it. We're going to harbor these bad feelings about somebody. And sometimes this goes on and on for years and years and years. And we're going to talk a little bit about getting rid of these roots of bitterness. Sometimes it's physical abuse that you suffered as a child. Maybe it's sexual abuse. It could be that your spouse betrayed you and cheated on you. And we have our reasons to be bitter, no doubt about it. Things are going to happen in life, but are we going to be distrustful of people forever because of that? And the more we think about our bitterness, the more it spirals into anger and it blossoms into full-on rage sometime. And the thing is, we love movies about that. I don't know about you, but a good revenge movie is satisfying. So we see this in Hollywood, and we kind of just start conjuring up these ideas in our mind of how I'm going to get revenge on this person. I went and looked for a clip that I could show from Revenge of the Nerds, but there just wasn't anything that good or that appropriate that I could show on here. But that was the whole premise of the movie, was these nerds getting revenge on the cool guys or the athletes in this movie. But these seeds of bitterness get planted, and they start growing and they start taking root, and we need to do something about it. But no matter how justifiable we feel like we have been wronged, our hatred and our sense of revenge that we have is just as sinful in God's eyes as the initial sin that the people did to us. And bitterness never draws us closer to God. It only pushes us further from God. So it's this non-productive, like toxic emotion, that has to be identified and has to be cut out and removed from our life, just like a poisonous root. And we punish ourselves when we are harboring resentment against somebody, when we're harboring bitterness. We're actually ruining our own lives, and we're ruining and perpetuating this hatred and this anger around people that are people that are around us, and sometimes people are afraid to point it out to you because they're trying to be nice. They know you're going through a difficult time. But the truth is, you're making it hard on those around you, and all of us are. So this self-induced misery that we've sort of have gotten into, it sort of perpetuates into these things. It never works alone, really. So when you have bitterness, it's sort of the silent partner, which includes jealousy, anger, hatred, disobedience, lack of forgiveness, gossip, especially. When we have been betrayed, we want to tell everybody about it. Now, because this person betrayed you, you're going to try to ruin this person's life as best you can through all the gossip that you can create out of this. And we're really robbing joy and peace in our own lives. And any hope for forgiveness and mercy that Jesus talks about, forget it. We want this person to suffer, or these people. I want to read this to you from Hebrews 12. It's on the screen here. It says this, starting in verse 14, "Make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." Okay, that there's a couple of good points in there. One is it's going to grow up and it's going to trouble many. Like I just said, when you're bitter, it affects those around you. We have to make it our sense and purpose to live in peace with those around us. If you're bitter towards someone, you're not living in peace with them. And the last thing I want to point out is that we fall short of the grace of God. How would God treat us? We want God to forgive us, right? But yet we're so slow to forgive other people sometimes when we feel like we have been betrayed. Though we can't control the outcome, we can do all that we can from our side to live at peace with other people, especially those who have hurt us. The problem is that when you're filled with bitterness and resentment towards somebody, you don't really feel like this verse applies to you. Hebrews 12, you don't want to read that when you're going through this. You don't want to extend grace and mercy to other people. Like I said, when we get wronged, we want revenge. We want oftentimes to have the worst thing happen to that person. But if we're not careful, these roots are going to take root, so to speak, and they're going to grow into our hearts and our minds, and we're going to miss God's grace in our own lives. Why? Because this root of bitterness just defiles and it just poisons us from the inside out. You see, bitterness works underground. It works under the surface. People can't see it. They might see your behavior. They might hear you talking about people. But, you look at somebody, you can't tell that they're walking around as a bitter person. On the outside, they might look completely normal. But you can't fool everybody all the time. On the inside, sooner or later, it's going to come out. And this revenge and this bitterness is going to start boiling, and it's going to bubble over if you leave it unchecked. So if you've lived a long time, I'm in my 50s now, there are things that have gone on in my life, I can tell you, that I could still be bitter about. And there's probably a few things that if I had to really dig in and I went to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or something, there's probably some bitterness still somewhere in my heart towards people, honestly. I try not to be, and I try to forgive people as best I can. It could be a business partner that cheated you. It could be a player that you coached, or a parent that you've had to deal with through youth sports or Sunday school teaching or whatever that you're just angry about. You're angry about the way that you feel like you were treated. And if you're not on guard, this root of bitterness can just tear you apart. And it's not a sin on your part when somebody hurts you, but if you don't handle the hurt properly, it's going to become a catalyst for sins of your own. And like we said, anger, jealousy, not wanting the best for people, wanting people to fail. All of these kind of things is what we're talking about in Ephesians verse 4. Let's read that. Ephesians 4:31 and 32 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as God forgave you." Jesus says in Matthew 7:18, it says, "A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and bad tree cannot bear good fruit." So what are your roots? Are your roots creating good fruit? Are your roots creating bad fruit? We have a tree out here that has a root that is coming under our sidewalk. I literally have probably seen 5 different people over the years trip over this concrete that is now bulging up. Okay, I asked my guys in my Ironman group, they're going to tackle it in the next couple of weeks. They're going to chop out the concrete, but chopping out the concrete doesn't solve the problem. They have to get to the root that's getting underneath it. They have to cut it, but not only do they have to cut it, then you have to poison the end of it. Now, it's not going to poison the whole tree, but it's not going to allow that root to grow anymore. And that's what we have to do with this root of bitterness. We have to not only chop it, but we have to address it in a way that it's never going to grow and it's never going to give us problems again. When I lived in South Africa, we lived in this pretty big, real solid house. Everything about it was just kind of sturdy. And we had problems with our plumbing backing up. And so I called a plumber, a friend of mine, to come out. And he says, "Oh yeah, these old houses like this, you have problems with roots that grow in through your pipes and start blocking up everything." He said, "I'll get in there with this little tool I have that it's like a little blade that like chops off all the roots." Well, he did it one time and he showed me that the roots actually go through the concrete. Like the pipes were so old, there's little cracks in it and they can kind of go in through that. And he would chop it and he would say, "Yeah, the problem is these are probably going to be back again at some point. So I'll see you again in like 6 months," he would joke. But the problem was we couldn't get to the cause of it because the tree was on this other side of my neighbor's wall. And the other side of my neighbor's wall, speaking of bitter people, was a lady who we called Bitter Bessie. Well, Bitter Bessie was probably one of the most unfriendly people I knew in South Africa. There were wonderful people there, but Bitter Bessie would never smile. We would wave at her. We would go out of our way to be nice. My wife even sent muffins over to her one time, just trying to reach out to her. Bitter Bessie was just bitter. Well, when Bitter Bessie's roots were growing into our sewer, I didn't want to go over there and deal with her. So every 6 months or so, I'd call my friend, he'd come in, he'd cut the roots, and we'd be, back on track again. It's a stinky, ugly job, but he would do it, and it never really solved anything. And it's like that with us. We can treat the symptoms, but unless we get down to what the root of the problem is, we're always going to be bitter. And a little bitterness can go a long way. Think about this. You got 2 or 3 kids in a youth group that don't like the leader. They start spreading the bitterness around to other people to where pretty soon nobody likes the leader. They all think he's a nerd or whatever. Okay, he's not cool. You got parents that will start spreading rumors or start spreading discontent as they're sitting there watching youth sports about the coach. He's not playing little Johnny like he should, and the reason why is because he's favoring his own son, who's not near as good as my son, and then all this little bitterness starts spreading around. 2 bad moms or dads can poison a PTA. They can ruin things, rather than keeping their opinions to themselves. But I think more importantly, we need to look at it. Bitterness can destroy families. Take any family betrayal, divorce, broken promises, addictions, any kind of misunderstandings, and we let the problem divide the family into halves. Now you got people choosing which side they're going to go to, and oftentimes these divisions last for years. Brothers and sisters don't speak to each other because of something stupid that happened at a Thanksgiving one time. Okay, you were supposed to bring the rolls, and I brought the rolls, and then it escalated from there, and you start pointing out other person's faults, and before you know it, you've gone 5 years and you haven't talked to your sibling. I mean, that's a ridiculous example, but sometimes that's about all it takes. I've got family members a little bit distant, not my immediate family, that haven't talked to each other in years. This brother doesn't talk to that brother. This son doesn't talk to his dad. This brother and sister aren't speaking to each other because of something that happened back in 1998. It's just, it's ridiculous how we go through life and we let these just little roots just grow into full-blown problems. In Arizona, we've got a couple different kinds of weeds that I've been dealing with in my backyard. We got some that grow up and they spread out and they're kind of sticky. And it just looks like it's just taken over your lawn. And you start scooping it and you realize it's all coming from one little thing. It just pops right out. Not a big deal. Get it all out. And then you get one that's like this long, spiky, kind of ugly thing. And you go to pull it and it's tight. And I'm sitting there like this, trying to pull this thing out. I eventually had to stand over it with 2 hands and pull this thing out. It had a root about this long in it. And that's what we're looking at when we say the roots of bitterness. They go down. They're not like this for long. Okay, and the longer you wait to deal with it, the more and more bitter you're going to become, and the roots are going to get harder and harder to pull out. Bitterness never produces good results. Because a person's been hurt, they will often justify their bitterness. Well, you would be bitter too if you had to go through what I went through with my wife. If you had been treated like I'd been treated, you would treat her the same way. The bitter person, as you know, will become overly critical. They're bitter about something, but then every time they see that person, they start looking for other things to criticize them about. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 13, it says, love keeps no wrongs. It keeps no record of wrongs. Okay, if we truly are going to love like Jesus does, we can't continue to keep up with all the times that we have been offended, whether it's with our spouse or with coworkers or whatever. Okay, we have to forgive and forgive quickly before the roots take place. All bitter people do is find fault in others. They want other people to fail. If you're truly bitter about somebody, you hope they not only get fired from their job, but you hope they end up in jail one day. You might not want them dead, but you want maybe the next closest thing to that. So it's not uncommon for someone who has been hurt to write off an entire group of people. Okay, you've been abused as a child. You don't trust adults at all. You know, that's one example. A wife who's been cheated on by her husband, now she doesn't trust any men again, ever. Well, that all you men are all the same way. You know, someone sees a Christian do something in public, they think they're a hypocrite. Because of that, now all Christians are hypocrites. Okay, that's where the bitterness problem takes place. And the other problem is that oftentimes people who are bitter don't even realize that they're bitter until someone, you know, points it out to them and shows them that there's a better way to live. Matthew 6 says this, verse 14, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others of their sin, your Father in heaven will not forgive you of your sins." Okay, that's pretty powerful. And again, that's the kind of verse we don't want to read when we're holding grudges against people. Okay, we want God to forgive us. Yeah, thanks God. I know you're going to forgive us. You're a loving God. But I'm not quite like you, so I'm going to go ahead and hold on to this anger and resentment and bitterness for a little bit longer because it makes me feel good. Well, if we really are going to live as Christ wants us to live, that means forgiving other people when they have sinned against you. And I know that that's easier said than done for sure. The problem is with bitterness is that it hurts you and me more than it does the other person. They may not even know that they offended you. And they're just happily going along through life. And now all of a sudden you've got this bitter, unforgiving spirit about you that is really ruining your life. God freely forgave us. So how can we not forgive other people? Again, easier said than done sometimes. I want to finish with this. And I want you to think about the seriousness of this. Life is uncertain, okay? Cancer comes, auto accidents happen. There are so many ways that people pass away unexpectedly. We had a guy in our men's group last year who died from a gunshot in a road rage accident. He didn't wake up that morning and know that he was going to die. You know, these things happen. If you have a relationship with somebody that is strained, that is broken because of unforgiveness, because of bitterness from your side, I would encourage you to reach out to them this week. Don't wait any longer. And the longer you wait, like we said, the roots are going to get deeper and deeper, and they're going to get harder and harder to break. So are you holding a grudge against anybody? Let me ask you that. I need to ask myself that. And you're never going to be more like God than when you choose to forgive. So I want to encourage you with that this week. Don't wait any longer. Find that person who offended you and get things right. See you next week, guys.